Hi, I'm Mark Sumner, CEO and founder of Robertson Sumner. Welcome to the Channel Chat podcast, where we will share learnings, best practices and failures with some of the biggest names in the IT industry, all with the simple aim of being the go-to place for IT sales professionals and managers to learn from others with the ultimate goal of maximising performance and growing the channel. Hello, I'm Mark Sumner, host of the Channel Chat podcast show, and today I am in the studio with Tim Wilkinson, sales leader or sales director of Avast business. How are we doing, Tim?
I'm good. Good to see you, Mark.
Yeah, nice to see you again. So, Tim, as I ask the same thing all the time on every guest that comes in here, I need to know why you got into this crazy industry of IT sales and when it was.
It was a long time ago. By accident, as usual, I came out of Newcastle Polytechnic. You say Polytechnic, most people don't know what that means anymore. With a business studies in marketing, wanted a marketing job, did a couple of sales jobs up in Newcastle, packed my bags to come down to London.
You were from London originally, or you?
Well, no, I grew up in Norfolk, in Norwich.
You?
Yeah.
Okay.
And disappeared up to Newcastle for 5 years at 18, and then realised that provincial life was never going to get me where I wanted to get to. I started work for a company and kind of looked around at 5 o'clock one day and the lights had all gone out. And you think, hold on, finishing work at 5 o'clock, I'm never going to make my fortune. So I packed everything up, came to London, signed on with a marketing agency looking for a marketing job, and they went, "You've done sales before. Why don't you do this? It's £7 an hour while we find you a marketing job." And I stayed with the same director, Ray Wren, for 5 years in pretty effectively 3 different guises. But I started by being given a spec sheet on an Olivetti M280 monochrome blue and white laptop, wow, which were overstocked, and a list of customers. Can you just get rid of these? I'd say 5 years.
It was simple as that.
As simple as that. It was just a complete mistake. I got in, I loved it, loved the people. Big Olivetti house at the time. A company called Mayfair Micros or Leradine Limited. Some people might remember that from the dim and distant days. But it was good fun. And as I say, I ended up effectively staying there for 5 years.
And is it telesales started off with?
Yep, literally. Here's a list, here's a spec sheet, that's what you're selling, get on the phone.
Any training involved in that, or was it just literally get on the phone?
Pretty much that. As I say, it was a kind of temporary overstock situation, and they decided they were going to get somebody in just to clear the stock.
Most people fall into sales. I've noticed that on the show that the shows I've actually had on, the guests I've had, most people don't want to go into sales. Why do you think that is, that most people don't want to go into IT sales as a career?
I think you can look at the broader picture and the way that sales is viewed here. If you go across the pond to the States, it's very much seen as a profession that you would want to go and do. Here it's kind of, the image is double glazing salesmen and phoning grannies up and trying to sell them. It's just something they don't need. So I think our perception in the UK is that sales is all a little bit grubby.
Right, yeah.
And
it's not seen as a profession, is it?
No. It's not something you set your heart on. But at the end of the day, in pretty much every role in life, you're going to have to sell at some point, even if it's just yourself in an interview. You see people, I guess, come through that process who can't sell, don't have that innate ability to impress themselves on somebody else.
Yeah. So
it is a skill, and it is an art form, and it should be better respected than it is. But I only think you find that out once you're in it, and once you start learning more about process and everything else. And I've done an awful lot of sales courses, delivered sales training over the years. So you work out that actually there is an art to this. It is a skill,
and it should be respected, shouldn't it? It's not. It should be a respected industry in sales, but people don't seem to respect it in the UK. I've heard that before. People in the US, it's actually seen as a proper job, an actual industry, a respected industry. Whereas here it's almost like, I couldn't get another job, so I fell into sales and I've tried to make a career out of it. So yeah, I see that a lot. With your career then, so you stayed at that company for 5 years. Where did you go next?
An interesting transition. I worked really closely. As I said, I stayed with the same director for 5 years, and actually in the same building, but kind of 3 different company iterations. And the third one, which was actually a bit, one of those kind of strokes of luck and fortune. I produced a little A5 diary-sized price list that a friend of mine who was publishing Computer Business Review at the time said, I'll do you a deal on it, insert. So we sent out 15,000 of these things. And it took off really quickly. But I built most of that price list with a guy called Richard Stocks, who was at Ideal Hardware at the time. And once we'd finished it, and he started seeing the sales come through, because obviously we were getting phone calls. I think the biggest deal I did out of that exercise was a phone call from Wilkinson Sword saying, can you ship us 200 of these notebooks?
Wow, yeah.
And we went, yeah, fine.
In those days, you couldn't get awareness any other way. You know, unless you were doing phone calls or sending out catalogues or information, how else were you getting the message out? There was no social media. There was no digital impressionist.
No, exactly. It was all
started only just about then as well, not long.
Yeah, I don't think there was really any kind of email marketing at that point.
No.
So yeah, it literally was getting something in print, and I don't call it genius or just fluke. Yeah, we picked the right kind of. I designed it very much. It's going to fit in someone's inside pocket, kind of thing, and literally just a list of prices. And of course, Ideal Hardware at the time were doing kind of third-party IBM drives that were considerably cheaper than buying the IBM original. Those kind of that kind of thing. And again, getting it out with Computer Business Review, which is a hugely respected kind of IT manager's publication, our IT director's publication at that time, gave us some credibility out of nowhere.
So, instant credibility, front of mind. People started reading it. Suddenly, bang!
Yeah, like the phone started ringing.
Yeah,
it was just
simple as that.
It was perfect. And so maybe it was just the timing. Maybe we got the format right. The pricing that we were putting out there in front of people for stuff, DEC VAX drives. Or equivalents that were so much cheaper than going to DEC for buying them. I shouldn't say all of that, but it's a long time now. So a very long time ago now. So that would have been 95. So Richard said, you should come and work here. I knew a few of the guys from Ideal, and I had a very interesting interview with Kevin Harper, who kept me waiting 45 minutes, and I nearly walked out. I was so close to walking out, and that would have put me on such a different path. Being the kind of bullshit, upfront, slightly arrogant sales guy that I was at the time. So what gives you the right to make me wait 45 minutes? And there's a lesson in that in myself, in that I would never do that to a candidate.
Yeah, so if someone made me wait 45 minutes for an interview, I definitely would leave. In fact, even half an hour, because I just think, if I was waiting in reception, would I leave? Yeah, no, I would leave. Half an hour, I think that would be crazy. I'd expect them to be on time. So what made you stay? Unless someone would come down and said, there's a problem. If I'm just sitting there for 45 minutes, I'd be like, do you know what, forget it.
Yeah, I don't recall exactly, but I'm fairly sure I was kind of, he will be with you, just this constant every 10 minutes. Yeah,
be patient.
Yeah, basically, he will be with you. So I stayed, and as I say, an interesting interview, the details of which I won't go into. At the end, he said, right, when can you start tomorrow?
He closed you down.
Yeah, and I said no, actually, because I worked for the same guy for 5 years, and I am a bit more respect than that. I don't think that held any sway. What clinched it was I said, yeah, I'm going away to play golf for a week next week. Kevin was a big golfer, so he was like, oh, well, that's all right then. So I started a couple of weeks after that.
Did he just expect you to start then? There was no in his brain, if he's closed you down for the job, he expected you to start?
Yeah.
What made you jump at it?
I think the environment at the time, Burlington Road, I missed the Tolworth Tower days for Ideal, which were very formative for a lot of people. Burlington Road wasn't much different, but it was a much bigger place than that and much more organised. It was a big bear pit of noise and buzz and loads of people on the phone, and I just thought I liked the environment.
Yeah.
So.
And what role did you join in?
Unusually, I went straight into the corporate sales team and got given all of the accounts that everybody had pissed off over the years before. So you're looking at what on paper was a reasonable account base that actually was doing no business. I guess over the years I've really learned from that actually, though they tend to be the accounts that and the people within them that are really, really hard to please. But if you take a step back from that and know that they're doing exactly the same to everybody else they deal with as they are to you, it takes very little to have a little bit more patience, take a little bit more effort than your competition are.
The best accounts are the hardest ones to win, aren't they? I believe that the best accounts are the hardest ones to win, because once you've won them, they're so difficult for everyone else to get in anyway because they don't want to speak to them. So I would look at before. If anyone was really frosty or really aggressive with me or really difficult, or I couldn't get through, I preferred those accounts to get into, because I just thought, look, if I can get through to you occasionally and no one else is going to get through to you, they're all going to give up. And if I do get through to you and I get a sole supplier or something, then I'm in. So I really preferred those customers.
Yeah, likewise. And I've had quite a lot of them over the years. I won't mention any of them. There's a guy that I keep going back to that I was explaining to the team the other day, because he appeared in a sales navigator search with one of my new business guys, and I said I'll just tell him that I send him my regards. And he was in the company before Ideal, one of my biggest end customers, but again he was one that nobody else in the organisation wanted to deal with. And I built such a good relationship with him that 30 years later,
still friends, still colleagues.
I can still pick the phone up to him and say, "How are you doing?"
Yeah, that's good as well. You tell you've got a good relationship, because it is about relationships. Especially in those days, it was about relationships. Good reporting over the
absolutely.
phone, saying something different.
But I used to do. And you might remember this because I think you were probably involved in getting people into the building. We used to run kind of 30, 40 people at a time on interview days at Ideal, and I did a session around what is sales. And I still think that role in distribution sales in particular, because you are generally given a relatively set customer base of partners, the people within those partners stay the same. So at the end of the day, all you do is fight, and they're all the same as you, and all you've got to do is pick the phone up and have a chat. They have the same interests, they have the same passion about the football results, the sport, what's happening with a girlfriend. Yeah. And if you pick the phone up and have that kind of chat with someone that has to buy from you or somebody else to make their money, it's the easiest thing in the world.
I ran a lot of those open days at Ideal Hardware when Matt Gorham was running SMB, Richard Gadd was running corporate, and Gordon Milner was the sales director. And it's probably the most terrifying day that I had in my recruitment career, because I'd have 30 candidates the night before say I'm going to turn up. I've had all these phone calls and speaking to them, and then slowly I turn up on the day, and then one by one, my dog's died, the train's cancelled, my car's broken down, my mum's got to take my little brother to school, I feel sick, I feel cold, I'm having a volcano's going off in Surbiton or whatever it is, and slowly go and I'd get down to about half, maybe 18, and until then I could, once they turn up, I could relax and say. But in those days when I used to go there, it was totally about, even the basics. Can they turn up on time? Are they going to be looking like they're actually coming for a sales job? Can they do the icebreaker and actually articulate themselves in front of people? And then they'd have the day where they actually do the actual events. But they did. But in those days, I think it was valid, because I think people, there wasn't the days of social media and having to do research. You couldn't do that much research. Yes, there was websites about, but they were so basic. Bell Micro Products, bless them in the days, their website, it was pretty basic. So you couldn't really get a flavour of the company just from the website. It was more like a shop window. Yeah. So what do you think about candidates going for interviews now? Do you think half of them get through if they went over those assessment days now?
I think actually, my kids are that bit older. My kids are both at university now, and I think we do a better job of educating them. I'm always amazed, and I've done a fair bit of presenting, and I got thrown into a much larger presentation, kind of a room of 200 people with a massive cinema on Thursday, and it was the first time I really felt properly comfortable in that environment, just strutting about stage, partly because I knew the stuff so well. But I think, if you look at the way Americans present, they have that out and out confidence. They're generally all really, really good at standing up on stage and speaking. And I was never taught that at school.
No. Are they prepared for that now, though?
I think they're a lot more prepared for that these days, and I think I've seen that in my kids. They're a little bit more confident, particularly around something they know about, just to stand up and talk in front of people, and that would have terrified me at their age, but it doesn't seem to faze them so much. So I think they must be doing something about it through that education process, or maybe just my boys have been lucky. But I think you generally see a little bit more confidence out of people in that kind of environment now than you would have done 20 years ago.
Okay, so let's move on your career. So you obviously started in corporate sales, then tell me, you were there 10 years, so tell me what happened throughout your career there at Bell. Or Ideal at the time, actually.
Well, it was Ideal. I did a couple of years doing that. I became a DEC, PC and service specialist, and there was nothing that I didn't know. And I knew literally every single part code off the top of my head.
Really? That detailed?
Yeah. Partly because you were doing it repetitively over and over again. So I picked up most of the really big DEC accounts and built my customer base like that. They used to do a Millionaires Club. And that was a real stretch to do £1 million worth of revenue in distribution channels. So it was us and West Coast generally, and I think they had one or two more towards the end of that period. But I was doing 5 million, and others was just struggling to get to one. So I owned a big chunk of that DEC market at the time. Again, just by knowledge is power, and again that's something that Ideal really taught me, that discipline to learn, and the more you know, particularly in that environment where a reseller wants a really quick response. How do I do this? What do I do this? What part code do I need for that? Again, probably slightly different now because so much of it is online. But this was all phone based. Give me a part code that I've got to order, and I was just good at it.
Do you think nowadays sales, you need that technical capabilities to back up your knowledge? Because a lot of people now, if I look at myself, I'm not technical at all, but I recruit for tech people. I'm more of a salesperson. Do you think salespeople in tech need to have a good understanding of the product base, or is it just they're good enough at sales and they can pull in resources?
I think there's definitely some transferable skills there, but I would have to go back to the more you know, the more credibility you give yourself. It's all very well saying I'm a sales guy and I want to sell you this, but if you don't have the credibility to understand where it fits or how it solves a need, you're going to fall over. So I think you can get away with it more. I think that sales engineer role is probably more prevalent than I recall it back in the day, and that's a bit of a crutch. And again, I think those that are successful don't need that crutch because they absorb. The challenge is it changes so fast. Yeah. But even somebody as old and ugly as me has kind of managed to keep evolving. I've gone from an out storage backup specialist into notebooks and laptops and desktops, and transitioned that through managed services and now into I love the security market.
Yeah, so let's move on from Bell. Let's go into sort of like the Novo. So you were in distribution for a long time, and then you took the jump to Vendorland.
Yeah, I again probably more by accident. These things kind of come along. I'd spent just over 10 years at Ideal and built it was a phenomenal place. I deal on Bell Micro, phenomenal place because it was really entrepreneurial. You just did something until it didn't work. Nobody gave you a hard time. You just moved on and got on with the next one. And we had ridiculous levels of success. As the company grew, I grew with it. Management roles and then into general manager, and I moved from team to team to team. Just fixing stuff. I guess ultimately I just almost outgrown it by that point. So 2005, I took an opportunity to take a redundancy package, and I think there were a few of us kind of hanging on in for it. And most of 2006 off, and then started to panic. And the role came up at Lenovo, and again, a really quick process, and kind of in to see Gareth Hansford. Again, fantastic country manager at the time. He took a bit of a punt on me ultimately because I had none of that experience to go in and run that effectively channel sales and marketing for a vendor. I was like, I'm well out of my comfort zone, but I am want to just kind of step through that and work out how to make yourself comfortable somewhere along the line. And if you're good enough, you get away with it, and if you're not, you get found out, and that's just life. The challenge within Lenovo was really one of mindset. Lenovo was not long, maybe 2 years, if that, out of IBM at that point, with a lot of the systems and processes and everything else, and I found that a real challenge. From this ultimately really entrepreneurial, just get on and do it kind of organisation to something that you needed to get everything signed in triplicate and all the rest of it. So I don't. There were absolutely times at Lenovo that I loved it, but I generally didn't enjoy that experience. And it was one of those when I came out of there. Right, what do I want to do now?
Yeah, because I noticed that because there's not many people that come. You had a little stint for 7-8 months out of IT, didn't you? There's not many people come out of IT and then come back into it. Because I noticed on your profile you went to work for Fly Centre for 7 months. 8 months for a little contract, is that right?
Yeah, it was a sales training contract. I've done a fair bit of sales training, mainly through my time at Ideal and Bell. And I always delivered. I always loved delivering the training, and then working with the individuals beyond that. I think sales training falls down an awful lot of the time because it's one day.
Is it true? Is it true, Tim, that those who can't do teach? Is that right? Sorry, had to get that line in, Tim. Sorry. Is that right? Is that those who can't do teach?
No, I think I've got a good enough history, Mark, to say that you can do and you do both. And I'm not saying that I'm the best teacher, but I'm very good at mentoring. So a couple of reasons for taking that role. I enjoy delivering training, but I really enjoy that one-to-one mentoring as well. And I think I came out of Lenovo really, I had a big team there. Again, some fantastic people and some that have gone on to do some really fantastic stuff. But I felt a little bit like an HR manager a lot of the time.
Right.
So I was seeing kind of 4 or 5 customers a quarter almost, doing QBRs with disties and some of the bigger DMRs. And ultimately, I was always the sales guy. So I missed that bit of it. And I came out of that really not knowing what I wanted to do, and saw the role at Flight Centre. It's a good kind of is there a path for me to go into out and out sales training? 6 months that taught me a lot. You can delight, encourage, enthuse people through training, but what's more powerful is the follow-up and the mentoring, and I was very conscious of making sure I did that. I did a lot of touring around the various Flight Centre branches after all these people had been in for kind of 2 days of formal, almost spin training, and worked with them one-to-one, sat with a headset on, listening to their calls, talking them through it, and that kind of stuff. And it was that bit that I really enjoy. is that one-to-one coaching and development. I love to see people flourish, and sales management or leadership can be a bit like a teacher. I think that at some point you have to expect that they are going to leave. If you're a school teacher, you've got a very set time period of when that's going to happen. In sales management, because you can't always give everybody that growth path that they need and expect, you kind of have to take the view that I'm going to do the best in developing you as an individual. So yes, on a selfish basis, the team, the company gets the most out of you, but also so you develop yourself so you're ready for the next step.
How do you as a leader manage expectations when someone wants to do a role that you clearly don't think they're good enough for? So, an example, I'm an account director at a vendor. I've been very successful. I've been a top performer. And I come to you and say, Tim, I want to be a manager. I want to be a manager. But you just don't think they've got the people skills or the organisation skills or whatever it is. But they're coming to you with that problem all the time. How do you, as a leader, manage
I think quite often it's more simple than that. There just aren't the roles for them. So it's that, turning that back down to, well, you're going to have to sit and wait is a symptom of most organisations not having a particular strategy in terms of developing people. I think that's a mistake. And not the planned routes for everybody. I think to answer the question, it is about going, right, where are the shortfalls, and being open and honest and going, look, you can't do this. More often than not, it's about people skills. I think from a management perspective, someone wants to go to that, particularly a really good top salesperson. They're generally really selfish individuals, and that's the worst person you can put in as managing a team of people.
Because they'll still do that in leadership.
Yes, exactly.
Even if they're not even got their own sales number, they'll still do that in leadership, be selfish and make it about them.
And I think good leadership and good management is about having an empathy with every individual within the team. It's the other mistake I think a lot of management make is, I've got a team, so I'm going to treat them as a team, not as 11 players on a football pitch, all who have different skill sets and different drivers and different motivations. And I think that as a new sales manager, the best place to start is understand the separate motivation and drivers for each one of your team. Because if you try and treat them all exactly the same, you'll switch half of them off, at least half of them.
Let's move on for your career. So you joined ASA, which for me at the time was probably one of the hardest environments I'd had to recruit for. I did a lot of work with those guys, Chris Pete Gould, Semi Levitt, Phil Gore, lovely guys to work for. But I always found it, and the candidates told me, every candidate told me, in fact, it was probably the toughest environment to work for. So tell me about those years, because that must have been an interesting time.
Interesting. I interviewed twice. So I was requested to come in for interview pretty much straight after I left Lenovo, and Semi was there, Bobby, Chris.
Oh yeah, Bobby Watkins, yeah.
And a couple of others. And it felt like, and I said so, and so it was one of those that it wasn't going to go very far for very long. It just felt like they were grilling me for what was going on at Lenovo, and that's potentially really unfair. It was just, they might have just been putting the pressure on, but it wasn't overly comfortable. So look, again, part of that kind of 18-month break after Lenovo, I did a stint at Northampton. I got working with a couple of guys that had come into ASA to take on the Gateway brand server and storage. So I worked with John and Nathan whilst at Northampton, and then went, you know what, I'd really like to come and do this with you. So that's kind of what happened. And I did have to go back through Chris Pete Gould as a blocker, but because the two were kind of separate.
Who did you actually work for? Who was the person you worked for?
Nathan Knight.
Right, okay, Nathan, yeah.
You remember Nathan?
Yeah.
Top guy. One of the best people I've worked for, without any doubt. And I've worked for some really good people. I could name them, but then they know who they are. So I came in kind of under the ASA, below the radar really from an ASA perspective, because we were this kind of separate little brand trying to do server and storage, which nobody else understood. And we had some good success.
Was it a tough environment?
No, not really, because again, Nathan was a great bloke to work for, and the expectation was relatively low.
Right, okay.
And we had some success. I picked the phone up to Andy Wright at SCC and said, right, I'm coming to see you. And fair play, thanks Andy, he let me through the door. So we kicked off a little project there, which gave me some kudos around that business. And then kind of 6 months in, maybe a little bit longer, they pulled the plug on the gateway and the server and storage, and all of a sudden both Nathan and I were right here in the Acer team doing laptops and desktops. Here you can have Computer Center, SEC, and Softcat and European Electronic. And it was very clear very quickly that covering any one of those on your own was going to be tough, let alone all four. So I took a kind of singular view. I'm just going to work on the big end user stuff. And it worked. I just focused in on the senior BDMs that were working the big end user or government accounts. Nathan and I we did a lot of stuff with SEC and Computer Center. We worked really closely with Crown Commercial Services on some of the big public sector tenders. And we kind of built something out of nothing. Again, kind of by accident. I didn't expect at any point to be, particularly after Lenovo, in Acer, selling Acer desktops and laptops.
And then you moved into managed services, Doherty.
Yeah, again, one of those. Yeah, there's a common theme here. I haven't really done anything by design. I quite like to kind of be led where life takes you. And
did that opportunity come to you then? Would you advise candidates to do that? That put yourself out there and let opportunities come to you, or would you sort of be more proactive? And because it seems like your career, you've been sort of half approached, and an opportunity's come up, and you thought, yeah, maybe I'll have a look at that.
A little bit like that. I've always said to everyone, look, if you're doing the best job you can in the role that you are, something will find you. And again, I had that absolute luxury of being at Ideal Hardware Bell Micro for 10 years with phenomenal growth within that organisation over that time. So there was always opportunity. But again, I'd say that to anybody still now. Do the best job you can, be the best you can in the role you are, and the next role will find you anyway. And I think that's kind of borne itself out. The timing around being approached for the Doherty job was interesting because Acer had made some head count cuts. Nathan had decided to go back to New Zealand. Some of my team were casualties of that head count. I worked so hard to build it from literally just me up to half a dozen, 7 of us, that it was just a bit of a blow. And I got a call from a guy who worked for me a couple of times actually, who said, our sales director's just left, you want me to put you forward? And I said, why not? And did a lot of due diligence. Spent a lot of time with Terry, understanding what his plans were. Spent some time getting to know the team. So I spent probably 3 or 4 months before I made the decision, before both ways, Terry and I made the decision that it could work. So it was one of those things. I didn't really know much about managed services, but that transferable skill level of sales plus management, people management, ultimately was a relatively smooth transition.
What was the main difference between working for big brands, so Acer, Lenovo, Bell Microproducts was a big brand in the day, and going for a more of an SME, not known company? Doherty wasn't that well known.
Again, probably a bit of a culture shock. I was ready, I guess, to get out of that big corporate vendor world where almost doesn't matter what you do, you're just a number on a spreadsheet. Other than someone somewhere has got your name and a number, cost plus revenue in on a spreadsheet, and you can be, and that's what towards the end of Acer taught me. Without really those people understanding who you are, or what you did, or your values, or what you added, from a soft perspective, you're just a number on a spreadsheet. Yeah. And I guess the real difference from a mentality perspective is, in that environment, a lot of people are there just to do a job, get paid. maximise it. It's a much more selfish environment. And again, that was a lovely thing walking into Dock City, a real family kind of feel to it. Everybody pretty close, working together, just to get stuff done, not for a non-selfish reason. You never want to lose too much of that out of the sales team, but if you can build and foster that collaboration and team spirit, it goes a long way.
How do you think you can do that in a small or a large organisation? Build that sort of, foster that collaborative, we're in together, us against the world mentality. Whether you're in a small team or a big team or a large team, how do you think you can foster that? Again,
I think it's about understanding the motivations of everybody in the team and where they fit. I still, and it's a habit from back in the ideal days of being in sales training at 8 o'clock every morning, which again I don't regret. It gave us a huge amount of knowledge, which we kind of talked about. I still do an 8:30 call with my whole team every single morning, and a lot of the time we give them a bit of free rein just to chat, and they do chat and they kind of get on. It's a good question, you made me think about it, because again, I think I've done a pretty good job, and it's a bit like asking top salesmen how do they sell. Some of the things you do, and stuff happens without you really putting much analysis to it.
What made you? Let's talk about that point you just made. 8:30 call. What's made you be disciplined enough to do that every day? Because not many sales leaders do that. I know they don't. I've interviewed loads of them. They're not doing an 8:30 call with their team every day. It might be, let's do a forecast call on a Friday and do your numbers. But I don't know many sales leaders that are doing a 8:30 call with their team every day. In fact, I don't know. Well, I haven't done anyone that said they've done that. So what makes you do that?
Again, probably a bit of that old school discipline. I like to know, where everybody is. And it is a call. So some of them will be in the office. More often than not, I'm late.
Run, skin out, Benson! Right, hold on. Turn the telly off. It's calling and dial into the number.
Yeah, well, we've had one of those. We caught one of the guys out a few months ago, and he stupidly just flicked his video screen on. So it's like, oh, is that a lot of Duvo we can see? But again, I think that's kind of back to the last question. That's part of it. That ability just to take the piss out. He was still in bed. The discipline was there. I might still be in bed, but I am still dialing in at 8:30. So, look, a lot of the time I'm not even in the office by the time we do the call. People are dialing in from, I've got quite a lot of remote people in the team now, so they are dialing in from wherever. It's just that let's tee the day up.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll do formal training, and that can be product training. And again, I've the luxury right now of two fantastic sales engineers on the team who cover my lack of knowledge, and we'll drive quite a few of those sessions. Quite often we just do a numbers rundown, who's where, who's what. At the moment, focusing on renewal rates, and let's look at where the expired licenses are, etc., etc.
And how long does the session last?
It can vary. This morning, I think 15 minutes. Right. I didn't have much to say this morning, and a few people out, so we just let it run its course. And sometimes I don't even interact that much. I just let them chat amongst themselves.
So it could be a chit chat about numbers. It could be a chit about what's going on. But it's more of a get together, and
it is that kind of get together. And it's that opportunity for the sales guy to ask a question about something they don't get. And again, that helps having the technical guys on the call as well. But
do you think, I've heard a lot of people do, get together huddles and quick meetings, and that's not nothing new in sales. What's your view on when people don't want to do that? They sort of say, "Oh God, they're sort of saying, oh, I don't have a meeting for half an hour. You've taken me away from the call or a meeting or whatever." What's your view on the sort of the negative spin of meetings or accountability, if you like? Because a lot of people in sales don't want to be like, we've done it here. We used to have meetings every day, 8:30 catch up, run through some numbers, etc. Yeah, we do it on a Monday now, where it's just like a quick setup for the week, and that's it. And we do it every Monday because every day everyone's going, "Oh, it's a bit of a ball ache now, having to meet every day." What's your view on people a bit negative about it?
We've been through some of that. I think the easiest answer, and I'm giving away some of my secrets now to the team, when it gets to the point where I'm struggling to really come up with what we're going to do next, I will set a rota and a structure that somebody is responsible for call on each day, not me. You lead the call. If you don't like the content when I deliver it yourself.
Right. Okay. So you heard that, guys. If he's struggling tomorrow, and Sandro, you've got to do it. You know what's happened.
No, we've got a technical one tomorrow, so I'm covered.
Oh dear. Let's move on, Tim, and talk about a subject that came up in the news last week, which we haven't spoken about on this show ever. So last Thursday, it was Mental Health Awareness Week. Now, when I got into sales and you got into sales, this was probably going on, this sort of stuff, but certainly no one ever spoke about it and no one ever talked about. You might get the odd person talk about burnout or they're under pressure, etc., but certainly never sort of mental health awareness. And there certainly wasn't a day about it. What's your view in the market now, especially for us in IT sales, about mental health issues affecting everyone, but affecting salespeople in the channel as well? What's your view on it?
Well, I think you're right. I think it must have always been there. I don't think the snowflake generation, and I hate that term because it's a bit unfair, and my kids are of that generation, are really that soft that they can't cope with the stuff that we cope with. I think we just hit it, and we weren't prepared to speak about it. And actually, the fact that we're even able to have this conversation now is testament to those people that have really driven hard to make sure there's an general understanding and general awareness that people's mental states are generally pretty fragile, and it doesn't take much to push people over the edge.
But if we were speaking about this
in
the 90s,
we wouldn't have been.
People would just be taking the piss out of. They'd be literally like, "Oh, just shut up," etc.
Yeah, get on with it.
Get on with it. I'll have to get on at 8 o'clock and I'm under pressure and I can't hit my targets. Like, get on with it. They wouldn't be saying. You couldn't even speak about saying you've got mental health issues.
No.
So why do you think it's more prevalent in the market now? We can actually be a bit more open. And I saw a program a couple of weeks ago where it was Thierry Henry and Peter Crouch were coming out, and I think Prince William came on, etc., and openly speaking about people with mental health issues. And I'm thinking this would never have happened in the 90s at all.
No,
never in a million years. So why do you think it's a bit more prevalent now that it's more open and people can speak about it?
Look, I think it is. Ultimately, it's down to people that are much more aware of these things than I am, and their drive and passion to make sure people understand some of the challenges that an awful lot of people face. And I think if you're in sales in particular, you probably have a bit of a thicker skin than most. You need it quite a lot of the time.
It's a tough job, isn't it?
It is a tough job.
I don't care if you're a distribution, vendor, or reseller. If you've got a target and a number in your head, and you're under pressure, because a lot of people, if they're not hitting quota, they're gonna feel pressure for their job. They're gonna think, actually, it's not just being like another job or in customer service where they can make a few mistakes and they still get a job. If you're under pressure on your quota, you're potentially going to lose your job, your livelihood. So,
and I think that's why it probably needs more airing in, particularly in the sales environment, because it is tough. Every month, back to zero, do it again. Yeah. If you don't do it, you better do it next month. Yeah. Because
if you don't get month 3, you
might not even get to month 3.
Yeah.
And that is a real stress on, do I keep my job, do I not keep my job? That's an impact on salary, home life, mortgage, all the rest of it. And I think we properly underestimate it.
Where are the buttons, do you think? Where are the hot buttons in that mental health? So if you're managing people, hopefully you've got everyone above quota, but if you haven't, most people have got a mixture of some doing it, some not doing it, some nowhere near it. How do you manage that basis on performance management, but balancing, actually, I could be dealing with people that have got real problems as well?
Again, I'd go back to that first thing is, you want to really try and understand your team, individual by individual. I don't think you're going to get it right. I don't think, and undoubtedly I've had salespeople go through me that I properly got wrong in terms of where they're at and what the motivations are. But I think at least if you're open enough, just being able to to give them the opportunity to come and talk and not think that they're going to get given a hard time for saying, look, I'm really struggling.
Do you think there's a lot of that in our market where in IT salespeople they're frightened to sort of step up because it sounds like almost like I'm giving an excuse? Oh, I'm not hitting my target because I've got a few issues or mental health issues. It's like, shut up, you can't say that. It's just an excuse. Do you think there's a bit of people are worried to actually bring these problems up in our industry? Because, again, not going on about it, but Mental Health Day, there's an awareness day now. This would never have happened.
Would never have happened.
No.
And
I'm hoping people don't jump on the bandwagon of that as well when they are using it as an excuse and they haven't got mental health issues. They're just using it as an excuse either. But it's a real fine balancing act, I think, now, because I'm hearing that, I think it's great, by the way. I think it's great if you have got issues and you should have a management style that you should be open to and people can come up. But no doubt in my mind, throughout the 90s and the 2000s, burnout, yes, we call it burnout, but there was a lot of mental health issues as well, because like you said, people are fragile. So how can
but again, I'm not sure necessarily you and I would have seen that, because they would have been in a sales role. You got beaten up for missing target, kicked around a bit more, hit your target, and then just left and never kind of found their way back into that environment.
Yeah.
And again, I'm probably guilty as much as anybody else of that era of managing people, of not noticing that go on and just going, well, you've missed your target, sorry, time to move on.
Which is harsh, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's brutal. And I guess that's the point, and ultimately I guess that's why we're talking about it. Look, I think we're in a much better place. I'm going to give a little plug to a guy who used to work for me that set up a company called Thoughtify, Tom Fox. He's quite open that he's had some issues. He's ex-forces and suffered from PTSD. I'll let you tell his story, but yeah, he's out there delivering mental health training to organisations so that actually we're better equipped to deal with this stuff. Because I'm not equipped. Yeah, I would probably be, right, I get it, I understand, and I'm going to back off in terms of the pressure I'm putting it you under, but go and speak to HR, because I wouldn't know what to do. And I think it's really important, the work that people like Tom at Thoughtify and similar organisations are doing to actually make sure that there are people within the organisation who are capable of helping their colleagues. I think we probably owe a lot to people like Tom who have been brave enough to stand up and go, we have to talk about this, and we are going to keep on talking about it until everybody understands that there's an issue that has to be addressed.
So moving on, let's move on to my last topic I want to talk about. So, and it is related really, because with mental health issues, that's normally having to deal with people that are in management and leadership. So leadership and management have to address those sort of issues on a daily basis, and performance management and managing people and etc. How do you feel it's best to get the maximum out of someone that's under you, someone you're managing? How do you maximise performance in either a salesperson or if they're going through mental health issues or whatever? How do you get the best performance out of them?
I'm a real believer in giving people the autonomy to find the best way. That probably sounds like I just get on with the job, I guess I have to be careful at times to make sure it doesn't come off just well, there's your desk, get on with it. And I've got 2 new starters, so
but you're not going to get much up, you two, are you?
when I'm back in the office, I'll get Anthony to speak to him to tell him that Tim's really not that bad. It's about trust. Ultimately, I've hired you because I know you are good enough to do the job. I will give you the freedom to work out how best to do that job yourself, because you'll do it in a way that you're comfortable with. If I prescribe a process, and obviously a lot of those are dictated by systems and everything else, but if I really dictate, your day-to-day movements of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and how many people you're going to call and all the rest of it. It won't necessarily fit the best model that you will find for yourself. And again, this goes back to treating every person within the team as an individual. Give them shall I say this?
Yeah, give them enough rope.
Give them enough rope to hang themselves, but never let them kick the chair away.
Yeah, and I think we talk about this a lot in our own business, where carrot and stick and etc. And I just don't think anyone in 2019 responds to a stick. I just don't think at all. We have it in our business now, where we're thinking, right, we're coming to the end of the year. Some people above target, some people are low target, etc., etc. And it's like, how can we keep motivated? For us, we're putting extra incentives in. We're putting extra carrots in. We're thinking, right, should we do a 6-month President's Club instead of a year? Or should we do some weekly stuff? We're constantly thinking of carrots to make sure people are incentives to make, instead of just like bang, 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 beating with a stick and saying you're not hitting your target. So what's your view on, because there's no doubt about it. Yes, there was incentives in the 90s and the 2000s, but most management styles that I knew and I'd heard of in the channel was bang, 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 bang. Get to your desk, don't leave till 7, do more, you're not doing enough because you're not doing enough. What's your view on the sort of the carrot and sort of stick mentality now in 2019?
Again, I'll go back to the individual, because there are people that thrive on being told exactly what to do, being told they're not doing enough, do more, do this, and being given real structure. And that there are those that will completely buckle in that regimented do this environment. And some will respond to the kicking. I agree, they're probably fewer and further between. But most will respond more to an incentive. But again, it's a question of keeping a balance. I was lucky. I went through the IT industry where some of the incentives were ridiculous. We gave away cars on the sales floor.
But do you think
that level?
But
was that really driving behaviour? Not necessarily.
Probably not. But it was a tougher environment. And I don't care what anyone says. The snowflake generation, whatever you want to call it. If you'd done sales in the 90s, in my view, it was a miles tougher job. Cold calling and not speaking to people.
So I started by door knocking to selling photocopies and fax machines around the northeast of England.
Yeah, and you don't want to be knocking on those doors.
Knocking on doors and trading estates around Gateshead.
Yeah, tough gig.
But
it sets you up.
It was great. It set me up.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go back and change it. It was a real education. We did have some laughs.
What would you say? My last question to you, Tim. What would you say would be your one bit of advice for either a contributor or a sales manager who hasn't grown up in the 90s and they're a younger manager? They're not in a snowflake, they're not a complete snowflake, they're hardened to it, but wants to really make themselves a name in the channel and wants to really establish themselves as a successful leader or a future leader in our industry. What advice would you give them to actually try and make a name for themselves in 2019? Or now, in fact, we're coming up to 2020 soon.
First thing, do the best job you can do in the job you've got. First and foremost.
So be a top performer in what I'm doing
Absolutely currently. Nail the job you're doing. And that will be a whole host of things. It'll be reading up. It will be learning. There's a lot of learning you can do. There's a load of books you can read. And you can really work on those skills around empathy and how you get your team working for you. For me, that's the perfect position to be in, where the team are doing it for you, probably themselves first, you second, company to get the results for the company somewhere down the line. Be the best at what you're doing now. Someone somewhere will recognise you for it, and so those opportunities come around when you're doing a great job.
So if you're a top performer and you're doing well, an opportunity will come to you.
But be careful. Look, if you're a top performing salesperson, then don't automatically assume you've got the skill set to be a top performing sales manager, because quite often I think those two things are very separate. Look, we've all seen it. The best salesperson gets given the opportunity to lead the team, and the team falls apart. Right. So, be aware of your own skill sets and and where the shortcomings are. If you haven't got people skills, don't expect to lead people effectively. But if you have, be a proper leader. Lead from the front. Don't be afraid to do the stuff that you're asking your team to do, and set expectations that are manageable and ultimately achievable. I've been lucky. I think I've got 2 people working for me now that worked for me 20 years ago, and that's a great place to be. Be the person that people want to come and work for. Build your reputation in that way, first and foremost. Look after your team. You look after your team, generally speaking, you have to do less of looking after up the food chain.
Brilliant. Tim, if anyone wants to reach out to you directly, they can reach out to your LinkedIn if they have the
LinkedIn,
questions.
Yeah, all sorts of. You just get hold of me. I'm
brilliant.
Around.
Tim, been a great guest. Thanks so much for your time.
Been a pleasure. Thanks, Mark.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us and listening to another episode of our Channel Chat podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard and are listening on iTunes, please could you give us a review and subscribe in order to get the newest episodes as soon as they're released. Otherwise, as always, we release an episode every Thursday at midday, so hopefully you can join us then.